Olá, eu sou a Graziela Andrade e a gente vai começar agora o nosso segundo Spiral Talks. Hoje a gente vai falar com o Yuji Oka e com a Raquel Pires, que é professora da Universidade Federal de Minas Gerais, lá na Escola de Dança. A gente vai colocar em perspectiva as duas técnicas, Spiral Praxis e Alexander, na qual a professora Raquel é formada. E a gente vai tentar entender um pouco o conceito de bodymind e falar sobre como essas técnicas se aproximam ou distanciam, em que momentos elas têm, o que elas têm em comum e o que não, sobre a perspectiva de cada um deles. Essa conversa foi deliciosa e eu convido vocês todos a assistirem para entender um pouco mais sobre a educação somática. Vamos lá?
Hello, my name is Raquel Pires Cavalcante. I am a dancer from Brazil. I've been dancing professionally for over 30 years. I'm also an Alexander technique teacher. I've been working with this technique for over 20 years. And I'm currently working at Federal University of Minas Gerais, where I teach in the dance course. My main areas of interest is improvisation, somatic practices, and artistic and pedagogical practices.
So guys, we're going to talk first about body mind. I want to understand what's the concept of body mind for you. I know it's not a simple question, but just talk about and we're gonna see what's happened.
Yeah, I think for me, I consider all the somatic field operating from the same place. And from my perspective, I look at body-mind, I don't call it body-mind, I actually call it universal body-mind. Because I think that we are drawing from this pool of knowledge and of experience from inside ourselves that is shared. And this is a very, very, very important concept, that when we're working together in body-mind, that we feel that even though there's great differences in individuals, the field itself of body-mind, where we are all drawing from, is a universal place, a common place.
All right. What about you, Rachel? What about you, Raquel?
Obrigada. Yes, it's definitely something that I started thinking about and getting to experience from my experience in the somatic field. That's something in common among all techniques. Alexander used to call psychophysical. He didn't call, body, he called organism. All this trying to get the idea that we are all connected. So trying to and the divisions between body and mind and self and body. So he used the word self, he used the word psychophysical, all as an attempt to minimize this dichotomy that we fall into it. I found that for me, this discussion makes sense in the body when we are doing it. And lately, especially because of the somatic influence in our field, dance, this idea became almost trivial, like, oh yeah, body, mind are united. Yes, we know it's united, but we had an education, and maybe Yuji can also talk about that. We had an education that said that things are divided, and that's how we grew up. So it's not that obvious, although it's there. And for me, when I feel it's there, it's when I am moving, connected, with my thinking and my movements and my intuition and my awareness. And that's when it makes more sense to me. So it's more like in moving and doing more than talking about it.
Okay, you want to complimentary?
Yes.
Talk about your education in Canada.
From my educational point, I started out, as you know, in physics, and I went into dancing, and so I went sort of on the extremes of both sides. I've been in a sort of very mental place and also in a very, very physical place. And what I find even more as I go in is even more dimensions to the situation. So, broadly speaking, we have this idea of body, mind, psychical, and organism. But within that context, there are things like emotions, intuitions, as you said, values, our interaction flow, the flow that happens between us. There's so many different dimensions to body, mind that makes us human. And I think that this is what we're really starting to figure out, is that, as we get more and more research into the field, we're starting to understand that it's a very complex field, and that all the disciplines of the university that we actually study is in there. Mm-hmm. And it's in there in this sort of, as Rachel said, in this very internal and experiential way. And I think this is what differentiates our education from the traditional education, which is separated, divided, and presented in books and not through experience.
Do you have this kind of education here in Canada?
No. I don't think. I don't think generally this is a thing. Maybe in some native cultures and stuff, this is more of a thing that is. But I think from a modern point of view, we're just starting to get into that space where that kind of education is seen as legitimate.
All right.
I just want to add. Can I add something?
Yeah, sure.
No, just to bring a word, Yuji, that I think it's very important for us in the dance world, and I'm guessing for you. And one word that really embraces that idea is presence. So the idea of presence and being present. And many people in different situations and, and conditions experience this sense of presence. That I think has this quality that we are looking for.
Yes. Presence, embodiment, flow. Mm-hmm. There's all sorts of really seminal, fundamental terms that are coming out that we feel when we're engaged in this process.
That's my second point, exactly that, because I'm thinking that we can tell that body mind, it's all techniques, all somatic techniques has body mind like a foundation, but there are differences between the techniques. So I would like to know about the foundations of Spiral Praxis and then the foundations of Alexander too, to understand a little bit the difference.
Mm-hmm. For Spiral Praxis, I think that the main thing, it's one of the newer systems, and it was something that is a part of my lineage, which is coming from an art background, but also a scientific background. And for me, I think a lot of people, all somatics people, start from different sources, and I think that one of the big sources is the ancient Greek philosophers and stuff. I think that that's what Thomas Hanna was all about. For me, though, from a modern perspective, I start from Goethe's work, which is, he has an idea of theory of colors, and that book has all sorts of somatic experiences, how we look at colors and how we see and how we process colors, that can be explained just from our experience. It's an amazing book, and it's probably the first sort of attempt to do a somatic experience on both a artistic, humanistic side. He is but also from a point of view of science. All the observations that he has about color and how we experience it. For example, if we look at a light and then we look at somewhere else, we see an after image of that light. Mm-hmm. All of us experience that. And so he put it really on an empirical basis as well. And this is something that's very important in Spiral Praxis. It's very important for us to create structures that are empirical, that we can reproduce. And so really getting this idea that it's a universal process. Anyone has a sort of a similar experience, different qualitatively, but the process is kind of similar for everybody.
All right. What about Alexander?
One of the things that I've been stressing lately is the importance for us to contextualize Alexander in his time. So he was doing all this work in the beginning of 1900. So that's a long, it's over a century ago. So that has implications, and that also puts him in a really place of being a pioneer of these ideas. Alexander has three basic concepts that guide the learning process. The first one is observation. So we learn to know what we are already doing. Alexander stressed a lot the idea of undoing things that we are doing instead of putting more new things in the body. So to know what we are doing, you have to observe. So that's the number one. We observe what we are doing. We learn to undo it, to stop doing things. So that's another important aspect of the technique. Not just, do this, do that, but what we are already doing that it's in the way, it's blocking us to really feel expanded and coordinated. And then the third aspect he called directions, which are thoughts are mental orders that would reorganize the body in a more coordinated and free way. So those three are the main aspects of the technique. And there are others, but they're more secondary. So these three are the main ones.
Yeah, and I know the flow, the notion of flow, it's important for the techniques. And I want to understand, because I think in this point we have some different between the two techniques. So I want to understand about flow in Spiral Praxis and in Alexander technique.
Yeah, as I work with children, that we work with this idea of flow learning. And one of the things that we talk about in Spiral Praxis is the polarity between conscious thinking and unconscious thinking. So when we are operating in the conscious thinking, our learning is very much based on this sort of linear, single subject, one thing at a time. And when we're in the unconscious state, we're experiencing things simultaneously. We're actually going into this flow thing. And so the way we look at flow in Spiral Praxis is when that conscious and unconscious start speaking the same language. They have a way of interpreting what's happening that is not in conflict with each other. And one of the things that we use very much as conscious structures is ideas of fractal notions of how to perceive things. So rather than looking at things as one thing, we have discovered through fractal a fractal kind of way of looking at things, that even though our consciousness can be focused on one thing, if it's in a fractal way, that one thing can actually make a very, very full three-dimensional way of perceiving the world. And so a lot of the language that we use is to bring that conscious awareness, and the techniques we use bring that consciousness into a fractal sort of mindset, fractal consciousness, so it can communicate with the unconscious and have a free flow between the two.
Right.
Yeah. Again, it's important to contextualize, just to touch a woman's body in the 1900s, was already a lot. So Alexander doesn't work with the idea of flow, but my experience is that a lot of ideas developed after him, mainly by dancers who realized a lack of movement in his technique, which tends to be very subtle and more static, on the chair, sitting and standing, walking, like daily movements. So in the research that I'm doing now for my PhD, I've interviewed a lot of Alexander technique teachers and dancers, and I found how much they have pushed, these boundaries away to find more movements in the technique and the possibilities of creating with articulating his ideas with our area of interest, which is movement. Alexander, one of the challenges, but also in the other way, one of the advantages of his work is that it is based on way of thinking. It's how we think about things. So it doesn't matter what we do. So that leaves everything open for us to create how we want to apply his technique. The other in the other way, it's challenging because we don't have a set of sequences or exercises, any kind of a structure that we can just reproduce. So that puts us in a place of inventing. That's where I'm starting to get, after all these years of working with his technique, to really move away from reproducing what he has done and really reinventing and recreating things that makes more sense to today's world, to my field, which is dance, and to the needs of, our students today.
Yeah. Then we come in this field, this common field for us, dance, movement. And I want you thinking about how this kind of experience, body mind, this inside experience can becomes movement. How is this process, this path between? I know we can separate the things, but how this experience can become movement?
This is a huge question for me because, I work with a lot of kids, and when I started first working with the kids, I wanted them to dance right away. And when I tried to do that, I found that it was difficult. Like, let's say I tried to get Helena to dance. I can get her to dance, but if I want her just to dance by herself, sometimes she can lock up. She has these certain things that she has to struggle through. So what I learned is that you have to start from the beginning. And what my dance thing, Spiral Praxis started as originally as a dance technique that I was creating in university. Because I was doing so many things, I was tired, and I wanted to, at night I was really interested in exploring, well, what does it actually mean to even move, and how do I regenerate myself? How come dancing should be healing, I thought. And I see dance as actually the end of a big process. So, the initial process, for example, if we're working with a kid, is starting to get them to be aware of their bodies first. I realize this is first. You have to be aware of your bodies. Then you have to be able to recognize how to initiate, how to start the seeds, the seed of movement. Just what does it mean to actually start a movement? And then how to embody that movement, how to incorporate, assimilate, coordinate it between yourself. And at the end of this long process is dancing. And so for me, inside of Spiral Praxis, dancing is where we get into flow states and resonance states. And it's representative of that whole process of developing awareness to the point in which the body can move freely and in a really healthy way. So it's actually, dance is actually the sort of perfect metaphor for flowing.
Yeah.
I think the somatic field has been contributing with the dance field in a really strong and intense and important way. I think it brought a lot of ideas and a lot of perspectives and a lot of possibilities of exploration, of awareness, of figuring out connections that, it's really very interesting and very helpful to our field, especially considering our history in the dance world, which has been with a lot of about reproductions, about, doing what your teacher told you to do. So somatics really open up a lot of possibilities, and I think that's really important to us. One thing that I think I'm trying to do now with the Alexander technique is also to do the opposite exercise, to see how dance can contribute to those techniques too. Not only somatics contribute to dance, but also dance can also contribute to look at those techniques in a different way, especially techniques that are not so close related to dancing. Like, I think Yuji's, it's much more close. You started from dancing, but Alexander, no. So I think this effort to also see the reversal is very important. And I have a interesting story to share. I got to know the technique in a dance workshop by a teacher who was also a dancer, and she was, doing this workshop, and I took it and I fell in love. And then I became a teacher, and then I kind of separated my perspective as an artist was one thing, and my work as a teacher, as an Alexander teacher, was something else. And only now I'm having the chance to integrate, because I was really missing seeing the technique from an artistic eye, approaching it as an artist, not as an Alexander technique teacher. That's very different for me. So I think what we can contribute to the field as dancers, as artists, is to really to offer our view to work with those techniques, because artists don't follow rules usually. So, so we can break rules, we can reinvent rules, we can teach in a different way, we can, modify things. And that's, I think, the main contribution we can offer to the somatic field.
Yeah, that's great, because I was thinking that usually maybe you had the opposite way, because you start like a artist field and comes to now to treatments and help kids and people with disabilities. So maybe we can talk about this approach for pain and for treatments, because I know that you do that, and Rachel Alexander has this approach too. So can we talk a little about this?
Yeah. There's two sides, I think, to body mind. And one side is dealing with human potentiality and bringing the highest expression, in the arts, as athletes or whatever. But there's the other side, which is starting from the beginning, and working with kids and with adults with disabilities or special needs is all about that side of things. And it's a really fascinating side, because where it doesn't reach as high in a certain way, it reaches more deeply. You start to understand the reasons why a child may have difficulty. So, for example, when I'm working with children with disabilities, like with children with cerebral palsy, they have to start from the very, very beginning of movement. They don't know how to use their body correctly. And it's a magical thing, because you can sort of see them start to understand. So Helena, for example, when you see her today, she's starting to get into standing and walking and using her legs and weight bearing and things. And all of these require such immense coordination between different parts of the body, and developed awarenesses in different parts of the body. And she is starting from this weird mix of like things, certain things are high, certain things are low. And so the whole process is about getting at the very bottom and integrating that, kind of like an artist. You have to be an artist. You have to kind of bring these things together in the ways that there's no rule. It's just whatever is there, whatever makes sense to that child is going to be their version of body-mind flow. So I find this part of it just equally artistic, but it's again about depth. It's not about how much they can do as much as it is how that very beginning thing where they realize, oh, this is how I do something. And so I really love this. I really love this this aspect of body mind.
You're great. Rachel?
Well, there is something interesting in the Alexander technique, because Alexander, ended up finding what he found because he lost his voice, and he was an actor and he wanted to act. So he started to observe himself, and then he figured out a lot of things, and then people wanted to, learn what he figured out for himself. And indeed, because he uses his hand in such an intense and particular way, we can talk about hands too, Grazi. Maybe that's an interesting topic.
Yeah.
It's very strong in the Alexander technique, and Alexander ended up freeing himself from the loss of his voice. And also, Yuji, I don't know if you know that, he was known for curing everything, like rheumatism or, any kind of disease, and people, without any more hope for going to the doctors, he would come to him. But eventually, after his death, the teachers that came after him saw that this was very much towards treatment and cure. And they were not so interested in that. Not even Alexander was so interested in that. He was interested in the educational aspect. So it became a clear cut, not calling clients, we called students, not calling treatment, calling a class, we are going to a class, not to a, a treatment. So they made all this effort to try to move away from this approach that it's, to cure you from whatever you have, but stressing the learning process behind it, which became then more an educational tool than a treatment. However, people usually come because they're in pain. That's, I can't say the percentage, but I know it's a lot. A lot of people came because they are uncomfortable in their bodies in one way or another, and they ended up getting a lot of relief. So the technique is still very effective in, relieving or even curing people from conditions, but that it's not what is the most important. The most important is the learning process, the educational aspect behind it.
So everybody can benefit from body-mind techniques. Yeah?
Yes.
I think one of the really great things about all these practices is that it's for everybody, really. Anyone can do it. I don't know any technique or method or practice that, it's only for one group of people. So that's also another aspect that it's really interesting. It's open for everyone, right, Yuji?
Yes, for sure, for sure. I love this idea of education, and I agree. It's, at the end of the day, it's, whether you're working to reach your potential or to recover from injury, it's really the same process. It is education. It's about understanding your body and understanding your mind and understanding how everything works together.
Right. So now I'm going to let you do the question, so Yuji can do a question.
I have a question. I have a burning question for Yuji.
Ah, ok. A burning question. Wow.
Quero só dizer que se você quiser falar sobre o toque agora, na própria questão.
Eu vou falar agora,
Okay.
exatamente.
All right.
Yuji, so I was mentioning the hands-on that
Yes.
became really important in the work.
Yes.
And now in my research, I was looking upside down. I was looking the issues, the problems with so much emphasis on the touch, because I found we ended up becoming dependent on the teachers and the sensation that the touch produces. So, students can't wait for the next lesson because they'll feel amazing, of course, because the touch is very powerful. But one of the things that I've been working with is the principles. What are the principles so people can work, with the principles and not be so dependent on the hands? I'm not saying that the hands are not important or they don't have their place, but especially for the my context, I cannot touch 25 students in one class, with the depth and the, intensity that it needs. So I'd love to hear about your experience because we've worked together. I know touch is important for you. Has a quality, has, intensity, has intention. So I imagine in your training, you also teach your, the future teachers to how to touch. But I want to hear from you how you see, the importance and the role of touch, but also you want your students to be independent and figure out things from themselves, not to be fully dependent on your hands.
Yes. And
That
this
was a long question, sorry.
Great question.
No, but this is actually very relevant, and Graziela, you can speak to this because I've been working on you.
Yeah.
And basically, there is, in experience, almost all the kids' work, for example, I do is dependent on touch because I cannot communicate and have them do something on their own necessarily. But even then, I'm trying to give them a certain physical experience so that they understand how their body can feel, and then they can start to move on their own in that way. So Helena, for example, one of the first things we teach is through the touch, we get rid of contractures and things like this. And then, but it's up to her. She has to discover through her own movement experience how that is meaningful for her, how that's going to change her movement. But with an adult and with spiral praxis, not adaptive spiral praxis, we can do this. And so, for example, I was working with Graziela in the morning, and we were working on the stomach. And so one day we would work with the hands, and we would actually go into, and just as you said, Rachel, the basic things that you have is the quality of touch you have and the intensity of the touch, how hard you press, how fast you're moving, and so forth. But all of these different types of flows can be communicated from a mental perspective. So today, Graziela was doing everything by herself, working with those elements of intensity and quality, but she is creating them inside of herself. And so, yes, this is a very, very big part of somatics. And I think it defines a lot about the adventure of somatics, that it's really about self-learning. It's about knowing yourself and to be able to guide yourself eventually. So yes, it's very, very important. And that's how we deal with it. We take those, it's exactly as you say, we take the basic things that the hands can communicate: intensity, texture, speed, touch, intention, all of those things are happening. But in a way, you can even work it better by yourself if you understand those parameters.
Yeah, it's not easy to come to this way, because when you usually touch, it's easy to find everything and to understand what he's saying. But I think it's about experience. I had to have more experience to understand better this quality of movement, make for myself, in my mind, in my body. So I think I'm getting in. Yeah.
I'll just quickly say again, also there's, in Spiral Praxis, there's 3 areas, and that is flow patterning. Flow patterning has to do with directing sensations and awarenesses through your body, and learning reflexes, which has to do with working with space, time, and energy, those types of parameters to bring that so that it's efficient. And then also what we call body-mind hierarchy or organization, in which we are figuring out where in our body to do this. So the whole system is based on this idea of trying to get eventually, past the therapist, the idea that there's a giver and a receiver, and that the person takes both roles. They become both of the people together. Yeah.
One thing that I noticed usually when we worked, which speaks a lot to how we work in the Alexander technique, is that it's not only in the hands, it's in the whole self, basically. So it's not one of the differences that I notice is the stress in the use, in the integrity of the entire body when you touch. So the hands is just one last piece that it's touching, but you're working with your whole self and your whole body as you touch. So I also noticed that when you touched me, it wasn't, just about the hands, it's about the whole, flow in the body and the whole integrity in the body to work, together. And the hands is just the point of contact with the other person.
That was something interesting for me when I was in university, and I think this whole Alexander technique, him being an actor, is a very interesting situation, because for me, I took some acting classes when I was in university studying dance, and it was a very, very beautiful experience, because you got to work with the stuff of life. It wasn't about in the studio working just with the body, and it's not just about the mind. It's really like, with actors, they deal with their life experience, and they deal with the dynamics that are happening inside their lives, and that becomes. And I'm wondering again whether there's a lot of influence in Alexander technique, because he's an actor. I don't know. So I know the physical part of it, but I wonder, is there an element where you are working with those sort of life issues?
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you can say that it came from his acting background. I know acting was his main deep passion, and he really didn't want to abandon because of the lack of his voice. And I know he worked with many actors, and then dancers, and then musicians. But what I know is that he in his technique, it's something that I'm going to go back to what you said in the beginning of Eastern, Western, and philosophies and, Oriental traditions. His technique, it's interesting. Sometimes we are working with one concept and then, this is right there, in the ancient, Chinese or, Japanese culture. So it's a lot about what we see in nature in a way. It's very broad. So it's not like that he discovered those things. He just put it together in a way that it's easy for us Western people, to understand. So his technique, it's really open to bring all those issues that you're saying about, about life. Some people say it's a technique, is a life philosophy, is a philosophy for life. So you can really apply in relationships, in the way you teach, in the way you relate to people, in the way you act in the world, because it's that open that can give you tools, to interact and to articulate with all these other areas.
All right. We can keep talking all day long, but we had to finish now. So just if you want to say something more just to finish.
Yes, well, I just want to follow up with Rachel here, and I think we're coming full circle again back to this idea of universal body-mind, and the fact that these things have been really around since the beginning of human civilization, and these issues have been always important for us to, what's our relationship to the universe, to our own bodies, and how do we make sense of the experiences that we have, as that's our primary connection to our life when we're alive, and even when we the way we perceive things like spirit and things when so these things are amazing kinds of things, and I think that the main thing is that all somatic systems are in this process right now of making that constant that is always with us alive, even inside of our modern lives.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful tool. There is something about, in a way, being timeless, because those tools, we can use it forever, independent of where we are, which context we are. It's something that we can really benefit. And I think especially the way, we are set up in our society nowadays, it becomes even more relevant, to acknowledge and value time, space, non-doing. Grazi was writing about non-doing. It's an important concept in the Alexander technique. Everything that goes against capitalist ideas, and productivity, productivity. We are raised in this idea of we have to do it, you have to do well, you have to do perfect. We are raised with those ideas. So those somatic principles, they remind us that no, there is value in the pause, there is value in the wait, there is value in doing nothing.
Oh, thanks to remember this, to remember us for this. All right, guys, that's all for today. See you. Bye-bye. Thank you, Raquel. Thank you, Yuji.
Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure talking to you.